The Raiders have a new GM and new head coach, but some familiar faces will make their way back to the Silver and Black in 2025. That plus more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for January 30th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out on the YouTube page. Either way, we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and, of course, because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, making sure we're looking good and sounding good each and every day. We appreciate him. We shout him out. You can check him out on Twitter, as many of you do, at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well, at your boy Q254. And, of course, you want to be a part of the show, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Each and every day we have plenty of feedback, and we'll have that again today. Coming up in segment number 3 as we close out the show, your calls and texts. A lot of good stuff, talking about the coaching staff, talking about the team, talking about expectations in 2025. So that'll close out the show. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, as I mentioned on Wednesday's show, we'll talk about the identity. Pete Carroll talked to JT the Brick and Eric Allen on Monday following his introductory press conference, and there was something that stood out to what he had to say about winning football. So I want you to hear that, and we'll talk about that, and it all ties in to the identity of the Raiders in 2025. Here in segment number 1, we'll give you the news and notes as we always do, and we'll concentrate on the Raiders coaching staff as Pete Carroll's trying to put that together. We'll get into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So one of the questions that was asked to Pete Carroll in his press conference on Monday, introductory press conference, was, what is the coaching staff going to look like? How are you going about putting the coaching staff together? What is it going to look like? What are some of the requirements that you have to be on the Pete Carroll coaching staff? And this is what he had to say about the coaching staff with him.
I'm really looking for people that have been with me, that understand the philosophy to some extent. I want guys that have never been around me before so that they have to learn what we're all about, and we can watch the process of them learning who we're all about and what we expect. And then I'm hoping that we can maintain some of the terrific coaches that are on the staff too, so we can have the benefit of the insights that they bring and the continuity that they can generate for us. So it's a combination of people that we're looking for, but it's all going to fall back into the same theme. We want ball people. We want guys that love the game, and I mean that's obviously, if nothing else, we've hammered that home today, Johnny. So that's, we want to make sure that we do that. Also, it's important to find people that can help us grow, and challenge us, and those also, I know in my history, I need people to keep me on track. As you can tell, I get pretty juiced up, and I'm going to get going. I need people to keep me balanced. That's why Glenn has been so important over the years, to keep me rolling. But so it'll be a combination to get that done if we do it well, and it's out there for us, and we've got a lot of people that are really interested. We got to do a great job of that.
So there was Pete Carroll talking about what he's looking for. He's looking for some guys that have worked with him in the past, some guys that aren't familiar with him, have not worked with him at all, and also he's looking for some guys that are on the current coaching staff of the Raiders, some very talented coaches. Why do I bring that up? Why do I talk about that? Well, on Wednesday, we found out about a couple coaches that will be returning to the Silver and Black, to Pete Carroll's coaching staff, and I believe it's a really good thing. Matter of fact, we'll start with the second guy that we found out about first, because, well, I think he's probably the most important one. Josina Anderson, been covering the NFL for a very long time. NFL Insider tweeted out on Wednesday, well, probably about Wednesday evening around 5 o'clock Pacific time. No, it was about 4 o'clock Pacific time. She said, "I'm told the Raiders and Patrick Graham are working on a deal to bring him back as defensive coordinator." So if they bring back Patrick Graham, which it looks like that they are in talks to bring him back as a defensive coordinator, maybe they give him the assistant head coach job. I don't know exactly what the title will be. We'll find out sooner rather than later. That'll be the first time since 2004 through 2008 that the Raiders defense will have the same defensive coordinator at the helm. The last time that happened, it was Rob Ryan. And not Rob Ryan, the guy that just went to USC, but the guy that was running the defense from 2004 to 2008. So it's been a very long time since the Raiders have had continuity at that position. So I'm excited about that. I think that that's a big deal. I know a lot of people at the end of the season were concerned about Patrick Graham because he did not sign the contract extension to stay with the Raiders. So a lot of people thought he was going to be gone. Of course, he went to Jacksonville. He interviewed for the head coaching job there. He also interviewed for the defensive coordinator position there. That obviously did not work out. He also interviewed in Cincinnati for the defensive coordinator position. Al Golden from Notre Dame, who used to be a defensive coordinator in the NFL, he ended up getting that job. So here you go. Patrick Graham looks like he's returning to the silver and black. And look, I think that that's great for continuity. I know that Patrick Graham and his defense has not been great as far as lights out or what my expectations were, even going back to training camp in Costa Mesa when I felt like this very talented defense could have the chance to be a top 5 defense. And some people let me know about it on Twitter on Wednesday, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. I have no problem admitting that, hey, I was wrong about the expectations of the defense. But even with guys with all the injuries that they were dealing with, and I'm talking about some big-time players with injuries like a Malcolm Kuntz, like a Christian Wilkins, like a Max Crosby, like a Marcus Epps. Devon Diablo was out for a while. Jacorian Bennett, who was playing lights out, he ended up the season on IR. There was a lot of guys that were missing on that defensive side of the ball, and they still did a really good job. Was it perfect? No. Is there areas that it needs to improve? Absolutely. Right? I don't think there's any defense in the league that is. I mean, it's not going to be the number 1 defense in the league, number 2 defense. Hell, it might not even be a top 10 defense. But if they can get that continuity back, have a guy that's been there, done that, knows what those players are like on the defensive side of the ball and how to utilize them and get the most out of them, I think that that's nothing but a good thing. And also think about this. The Raiders have 29 free agents, and a lot of those guys are on the defensive side of the ball, and some pretty big names. Malcolm Kuntz, right, a guy that never even made it to 2024 because he tore his ACL. He was a guy that looked like he was going to be in line for a really big season. K'Lavon Chaisson, a guy that was picked up off waivers and thrived with the Raiders down the stretch. Robert Spillane, he's been great since the Raiders picked him up. He's been their best linebacker in a very long time. Adam Butler, he shined. Without Christian Wilkins in the lineup, he shined. Nate Hobbs, he's a guy that's been dealing with a lot of injuries throughout the course of his career, but when he's in there, he's a really good player. Trayvon Merrick ended up having another really good season, and I think actually probably his best season so far in the NFL, especially playing near the line of scrimmage. All those guys are free agents. I'm not saying that they're all going to come back, but with Patrick Graham back in the mix, he could say, hey, the non-negotiables. Remember, we talk about non-negotiables all the time, and we talk about guys that have to graduate. The non-negotiables could be, hey, I need a Malcolm Kuntz back. I need a K'Lavon Chaisson back. I need Robert Spillane. Robert Spillane is basically the quarterback of the defense. He's the guy that, as Patrick Graham has said, is the coach on the field. He's the guy. He's him on the field. So I could definitely see him pounding the table and saying, hey, I need Robert Spillane back. Adam Butler, I could see him coming back. Trayvon Merrick on the back end. Again, I mean, there's a case that could be made for all the guys I mentioned. Kuntz, Chaisson, Spillane, Butler, Hobbs, and Merrick. There's a case for all those guys. Again, I don't think that all of them are going to come back. I just don't think that that's realistic. That's a lot of retaining your own guys. But again, for a defense that was very promising and dealt with a lot of injuries, they still kept the Raiders in a lot of the games throughout the course of the year. And yeah, I know it's nothing to write home about when you're on a 10-game losing streak like the Raiders were at one point and only win 4 games. It's nothing to hang your hat on and say, man, they sure are really stinking good. But again, if you watch the games, not just look at the box score, the defense more times than not did a really good job. So I think that is a big plus that Patrick Graham is going to be returning to the Raiders as a defensive coordinator, and maybe a little bit more. Maybe he gets a assistant head coaching job. Maybe he's a succession plan to Pete Carroll. Who knows? I don't know the details of it, but again, that was a welcome sight to see when Josina Anderson tweeted out that Patrick Graham and the Raiders were in conversations to bring him back. Also, we found out from Tom Pelissero from NFL Network that the Raiders are retaining special teams coordinator Tom McMahon. So there you go. There's some more continuity along the staff for Pete Carroll. So you bring back Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator, which also, by the way, I didn't mention, probably means that you bring Robbie Leonard back, who is the defensive line coach. If you can get those 2 guys back, that's huge, right? There hasn't been any kind of confirmation or tweets or information or any NFL insiders putting any sources out saying that Robbie Leonard's coming back. He did interview for the defensive coordinator job on Monday, but like if Patrick Graham comes back, talking about non-negotiables, Probably Robbie Leonard coming back as well is a non-negotiable. He's a guy that I actually spoke to on Monday when I saw him at the press conference. But they're also bringing back Tom McMahon as a special teams coordinator. And again, I think that that's a good thing as well. And the reason I feel that way is just because you have A.J. Cole, you have Daniel Carlson, you have this battery of guys that all work together, and special teams is kind of a weird unit anyway. So you want to have as much continuity as possible. You don't want A.J. Cole and Daniel Carlson to all of a sudden have to be learning a new style again, a new scheme again, or, different from a different coach. Let's put it like that. So I think Tom McMahon returning is a good thing. I mean, his special teams unit outside of maybe a game or two, of course, there was a time when A.J. Cole got the punts blocked and he was upset after the game. Daniel Carlson missed a couple field goals. But for the most part, the special teams unit was pretty good. Right, they do need a guy that can, threaten the other team as far as kick returns. I think they have a couple guys that qualify for that, but they've got to find a way to maximize that and finally really be a threat to take a couple to the house or whatever and flip the field a little bit, for the offensive side of things. They do need that game changer, and maybe they can find that guy. Maybe they think they have that guy, but it sounds like Tom McMahon. Well, it's not sounds like he is. Tom McMahon is returning as a special teams coordinator in 2025 under head coach Pete Carroll. So there's a little bit of continuity. There's going to be change. We know that, right? Pete Carroll's he's interviewing many different coaches to be on the coaching staff, and I guarantee he's not going to retain all the coaches that Antonio Pierce had on his staff. But Patrick Graham, check. Special teams coordinator Tom McMahon, check. Now, if they can get a check mark next to Robbie Leonard, that's a trifecta as far as I'm concerned. So, with that being said, what's the identity of the Raiders going to look like in 2025 under Pete Carroll? We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, and that is Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. And then waiting some more, wondering and worrying. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back, and that's guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into what I believe the Raiders' identity is going to be in 2025 and moving forward under head coach Pete Carroll. Obviously, it's a very tough division with the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Chargers. They've all gotten better, and the Chiefs have dominated the AFC West. So now it's time for the Raiders to catch up. So how are they going to do it? Well, head coach Pete Carroll, he met with the media on Monday. Thought it was really good, him and GM John Spytek. But then he went upstairs into the podcast studio and sat down with JT the Brick while he was live on the air on Raider Nation Radio 920. And Eric Allen, the hopefully soon-to-be Hall of Famer, they were in there peppering him with a bunch of questions. Really good interview. I definitely encourage you to go back and check it out, lvsportsnetwork.com. It is on our radio station's website. Really good stuff, so you can hear it in its entirety. But one part of that conversation really stood out to me, and that's when Eric Allen, was asking him about the running game and looking at the success of running backs around the league, when he's looking at Derrick Henry, when he's looking at Saquon Barkley, obviously former Raider Josh Jacobs, the success he had, and the fact that teams are running the rock now. Obviously, the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh returns, has a heavy emphasis on running the ball. The Broncos are able to run the ball. You're seeing a heavy emphasis, even though we were all hearing that, well, you can get a running back anywhere, doesn't really matter. We know what Pete Carroll's always done in the past. He's been very heavy when it comes to the running game. So EA asked him and said, I'm sure you're probably excited that it feels like the running game is back. And I thought this was really important, what Pete Carroll had to say about the running game and winning football.
It's not like it came back, because it never left to me. I mean, that's the game. That's how the game should be played. And it's not because you want to just be physical, which we love, and run the football and be tough. It's not just because of that. It's because the foundation of this game is about winning by playing great ball. And the best players don't always win. The teams that play the best usually do, though. And so it's how you put that all together. And the quarterback position is so unbelievably overblown about because there's only a few guys that are the great ones, and they can change the game, but there's not very many guys like that. But you can still be highly successful and productive in building your team around the game that allows the quarterback to manage his aspect of it. And that's, if you run it, then you can play pass it. If you can play pass it, then you can strike him down the field. You can create the big plays that you want to create, and you can complement the defense. You can take care of the football better. On and on and on. There's so much to it, So, but it's really warms my heart to see it, so that you see it as you just expressed. That boy, it's come back to running the football. Look at the clubs that are, look what Danny Campbell's done.
Yeah.
He had a great run to get this thing going there, and you see that the Chiefs are still, and he's still committed and stuck on. We're going to keep on controlling that football. Those long drives that they're capable of is the function and execution of the game, really built around the ability to run it. The Eagles are probably the most obvious demonstration of it because Saquon's so out of this world.
So that was good stuff, I thought, from Pete Carroll. And, I hear people tell me all the time, well, he's been around the league a long time. He knows how to win the press conferences. He knows how to talk to the media. And that's true. There's no doubt about it. But when he puts the vision out there and he puts the message out there and he says that, the quarterback is important, but there's only a handful of guys that are elite that could change the game. And there is, right? And I've complained about it on this show. I've complained about it on my radio show. Any platform I've ever been on, I've complained about elite quarterbacks and how people get so loose with that term. There's only like 4. Right. And there can even be an argument right now, if you want, for the 4 that are elite. I look at Patrick Mahomes, I look at Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. And I don't care what order you put them on, as long as Patrick Mahomes is first. You can put the other 3 in whatever order you want. Those are the guys that I believe are elite quarterbacks. Those are game changers. Those are the guys that if they have the ball in their hand, magical things can happen. Right? If they have their hands on the ball at any given moment in the game, bad things could happen for your defense. You just understand that, right? That's just what it is. That's how I feel about it. The rest of the league has good quarterbacks, maybe a couple that are close to being great, and others that are just okay, right? And obviously the Raiders have not had great quarterback play in a very long time. They had good, consistent quarterback play for a long time with Derek Carr for 9 years, but it was never like elite. And even when Rich Gannon won the MVP, it was top-notch ball. I mean, he was the league MVP for a reason, but it was short-lived, right? It was nothing that was long-term as far as like being an elite quarterback. Now, there's quarterbacks that are paid like they're elite. You can look at, Trevor Lawrence. You can look at Dak Prescott. You can look at Justin Herbert, right? There's a handful of quarterbacks that are getting paid like they're elite. Jalen Hurts, right? I'm a Jalen Hurts fan, but he's not an elite quarterback. He's a good quarterback, right? So, if you're going to have an elite quarterback, then okay, the game has changed. But most likely than not, you're not going to have an elite quarterback. Anyone who's listened to this show knows that I believe heavily in Shedeur Sanders. I don't know if the Raiders are going to get him. I also believe in Cam Ward. I also don't know if they're going to get him. It might end up being a case where they end up with a Jackson Dart. They might end up with other. I don't know what other is, but, whoever they decide that they want to go and get in the draft, and I do believe they'll draft a quarterback at some stage of the game, whether it's early or late, he's not going to be elite. Because none of those quarterbacks that I just mentioned are elite, but they're good if you do the right things, if you surround them with, as Pete Carroll was saying, right, running game, offensive line. You got to be able to protect them. They've got to have weapons, right, the defense. And that's why I think it's so important that Pat Graham is coming back, because at least the defense, there's continuity there. So that to me is a really good thing. And again, as I mentioned on Wednesday's show when I was talking about Russell Wilson, he can end up being a bridge quarterback that knows how to win with that kind of surrounding. A solid run game, a really strong defense, and obviously protection on the offensive line, which is funny because it's really a recipe that Antonio Pierce wanted. And I'm not throwing Antonio Pierce's name in it to like justify why he was the head coach, this, that, and the other, but that was basically the recipe that he wanted. A very solid downhill run game, right? A strong rushing attack, a very solid defense that they can lean on and be the heavy lifters, and then the quarterback play, not mess it up. Do just enough and complement the defense. The problem is Antonio Pierce didn't have the chops. He didn't have the skins on the wall. He didn't have the experience to go out there and execute it. And, of course, they don't have the depth. Once they start getting hit with injuries, it was game, set, match, right? They just weren't able to do it. But Pete Carroll, opposite of AP, has the experience. He has the skins on the wall. He has the resume. He's never lost or had a losing season where he won less than 6 games. He hasn't had that. And I'm not saying 6 is that's good, but that's just what he's had. I mean, that's the least amount of games he's ever won is 6, right? So, I mean, you feel like, okay, he knows what the recipe is. He knows that he's got to get a quarterback. And, what John Spytek and him said in the press conference on Monday was, and John Spytek, the GM, said this in particular, he respected what Pete Carroll did for the quarterback position in Seattle, where they kept trying until they got it right. And that's something that the Raiders didn't do. Once they got Derek Carr, they were satisfied. I know they went and got Connor Cook, that's fine. But they didn't consistently go and get quarterback after quarterback after quarterback that could potentially be that guy that takes them to the next level. Hell, even the Chiefs went and made that move. They had Alex Smith. He was consistent. He was good, but he wasn't a game changer. He wasn't the guy that was going to take them to the next level. So they kept trying until they got him. And once they traded up and gave up everything they did to go get Patrick Mahomes, they knew they had their guy. But they also were winning with Alex Smith. So that's what I'm excited about, and that makes me feel like this identity is going to be very similar. They're going to try to build this thing like they did in Seattle. Now, in Seattle, they had great players on defense. I mean, great. When you're talking about the Legion of Boom, you're talking about the defensive line, the back end with Earl Thomas, you got Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor. I mean, you just don't have those dudes walking through every locker room. Right? The Seattle Seahawks, they had some dudes. The good thing is they got those dudes in multiple rounds. They weren't just first-round guys. And then, of course, they had good players on offense led by Marshawn Lynch. But it's not like any of their wide receivers were super elite, right? And the Raiders have Brock Bowers. They have Big Mike. They have Jacoby Myers. And for sure, they can go get another wide receiver in the draft if they want to, a guy that they feel like eventually could be the number one target. I can argue that they can probably build the offense around, even if it's Russell Wilson for a year or whatever, a year and some change. I can argue that they could probably build the offense to be more explosive than the one in Seattle. But the only thing is they're not going to be able to build that defense to look like the Legion of Boom. I mean, that thing was next level. You knew that was pretty much lights out. And if they can, well, then that's a whole nother conversation. But I don't want to get ahead of myself and get super fired up and pumped up and think that that's happening. I don't think the Legion of Boom is walking through Allegiant Stadium doors anytime soon. But if you can get any kind of defense, and again, Patrick Graham already has the recipe. He has a lot of players, especially ones that are coming back from injury. If you can get a defense to play solid and keep you in games like the defense did even in 2024, even dealing with all those injuries, you can win some games. Now, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? Going from 4 wins to what? I don't know, 7, 8, 9? Who knows? I mean, anything is possible. But you have a very tough division that you're playing in. So you have to realize that as well. We don't know the schedule. We don't know what free agencies happen. We don't know about the draft yet. So we don't know who they have and what they're working with. But the identity is definitely going to be that smash mouth, strong defense, a quarterback that is good enough to get it done. And that could just be at first the quarterback. That's what I'm like. Say they were to land a Shador, who I want them to get. I think he has enough arm talent to be a guy that can win it all. I really do. As long as you have all those pieces around that you're supposed to have, right? And again, and we'll close out the segment going back to the question that I asked both John Spytek and Pete Carroll on Monday about the quarterback position. It was like the second or third question in the presser because I knew how important the quarterback position is, but I loved their answer. You already heard what Pete Carroll had to say about the running game and how important that is and how that's winning football. Well, here's their response as we close out segment number 2 to me asking about the quarterback position. What are you looking for in that spot?
I'd go back to that. I mean, I got a chance to be around, in my opinion, the greatest player ever. And it was a love of the game and a competitive desire that just didn't allow him to quit. He was never out of a fight. He was willing to do things that the ordinary football player person wasn't willing to do. And, we're gonna turn over every stone to find that leader for this team too. There's just going to be certain requirements of the job. And it doesn't necessarily take the strongest arm or the best thrower. It's the guys that will push their teammates to a place that's uncomfortable, that will give almost anything to win. That's what the best ones do, and we're going to find one of those.
Yeah, I would add to that it's our mission to build this football team up around the quarterback position. It isn't the only spot. We happen to have the greatest of all time to help us and to see clearly, and we're gonna lean on Tom as much as we possibly can for his insights, because nobody has the insights that he has. He's that unique. But it's the quarterback position is one of the positions on the team, and we've got to make it all fit together well. I've had pretty good success with my quarterbacks in the past. You can go all the way back to college days, and they've all turned out to be really extraordinary members of our club. there's a way to embrace the challenge that the quarterback has from the rest of the football team as well. We need to support our guy, and we need to do what we can to make that work. It's really about making a great football team around the quarterback position. Coach Walsh taught me a long time ago that it's the hardest position in professional sports to play, and so we need to make it as easy for them as possible. And we'll go about doing that by running the football, protecting them, taking care of the ball, playing great defense, and kicking the football when we want to kick it. And there's a lot that goes into this, but to think about how fortunate we are to have Tom Brady with us, it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Again, they emphasize that it's not just about the quarterback; it's about everyone around the quarterback. It's so important, and it really is. And if they build it right in that mold, John Spytek with his ability in the draft, and Pete Carroll knowing what he's looking for, Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator with the continuity, you could bring back Robbie Leonard. Right, you obviously have a really strong kicking game when you have Daniel Carlson and A.J. Cole, two of the best specialists in the league. Right, you have yourself a really good recipe. Again, you've got a lot of heavy lifting. There's obviously a lot of time to put this thing together well before they ever kick off to start the season in 2025. It's only January. They don't play till September. So there's going to be a lot of time to talk about what they have and how they're going to put it together. But the identity is clear. The blueprint has been there. Right, can they duplicate it? Well, we'll find out. But at least there's no questioning, okay, what's the identity of the Raiders going to be in 2025? I think we all know what that identity is going to be, which, oh, by the way, means that they're going to have to upgrade that offensive line as well. You're going to see a lot of attention to detail when it comes to the offensive line. If they can get a solid right tackle, I think DJ Glaze is good, but competition is great. Give him some competition. Don't just give him the spot, right? Put Jackson Powers-Johnson at the center spot. Think that he's a solid center. And solidify your guards. All of a sudden, if you have an offensive line like the Raiders had back in 2016, when they had Donald Penn, Kelechi Osemele, Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson, and Austin Howard, if you have that kind of offensive line, you're going to be able to do exactly what Pete Carroll's talking about, and that will truly form the identity of the Silver and Black. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts will close out the show, 707-654-4693. That's coming up next. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor, and that is Game Time. And I realize the playoffs are over. I know the only game left is Super Bowl 59, but, man, there is nothing better than going to see NFL action live and in person, right? I'm blessed that I get to go to Allegiant Stadium all the time with a credential, but even if I didn't, I would go and get tickets through Game Time just because, again, the energy of being in the stadium, seeing all the action up close and personal is incredible, and it's basically second to none. So it's something that you want to do. Well, Game Time, they have a feature called Game Time Picks that's going to help you get tickets to live events, not just football, but basketball, comedy, theater, whatever the case may be, movies, whatever it is that you want to go to see live because the energy and everything just feels different, and it is different. Game Time has you covered. Again, Game Time Picks. They have super deals that are really impressive. They have on-time ticket delivery, low price guarantee. It gives you peace of mind. It's exactly what you need, exactly what you want. So right now you should take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. What time is it? Game time. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from Big E in the 209. He's calling to talk about Mark Davis as the owner, what he thinks about him, and explains himself. Here he is, Big E in the 209.
What up, Q? This is Big E from the 209, man. Possible unpopular opinion, but Mark Davis isn't a bad owner or a too hands-on owner. And let me clarify. I feel like every decision Mark Davis has made has seemed on paper to be a decent decision. He gave John Gruden that 10-year contract. That was that wasn't a bad thing. I mean, they drafted horribly in that time, but I feel like we were on the right track to do something. We made the playoffs under Rich Bisaccia to finish out the year. Then on paper, the Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniel hire, I was optimistic. I was 50-50 on Josh McDaniel, but I'm of the group that thinks Dave Ziegler's not a bad GM at all or won't do good in the future of the league. And then you fast forward to Tom Telesco and AP. I think it's a little premature on Tom Telesco, Yes, but they're moving on to a new era. So, and even with these current hires, I think they're good. I feel like, I feel like Mark Davis always defers to and always has said he doesn't know what he doesn't know, and he always seeks the best help. It's not like Jerry Jones where it's his show. He has his hands in everything. He allows people to tell him or instruct him what they think is best, and he allows his coaches to coach and his GMs to GM. He's not involved to the extent that I feel like, like a Jerry Jones is, or the owner of the Carolina Panthers. So anyway, Q, I just wanted to say that I'm very optimistic about, and as usual, we will see, but I think this is going to be ushering a new era of Raider Nation. So anyways, Q, have a good one, and let's go Raider Nation.
Big E, Easy E. Thanks, man. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And I don't disagree with that at all, right? I think that Mark Davis is good because he allows people to make football decisions. As he told us on Monday, and I had the sound on Tuesday's show, right? He leans on others. He knows what he doesn't know, which is football. He tried to let John Gruden be that guy with that 10-year contract. We know how that shook out. He tried to pass the sticks to Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. We know how that worked out. He tried to pass the sticks to Tom Telesco and AP. We know how that worked out. Now it's time for John Spytek and Tom Brady and also Pete Carroll. So I think he's trying to do everything that he can to get this thing turned around. There's nothing more than he wants to do than win. Obviously, he's listened to people in the past, but he's listened to the wrong people. So hopefully this time around, and it feels like it's different. It feels like the process is better. Hopefully these are the right guys. And, I mean, Tom Brady is the guy that they're leaning heavily on. John Spytek is a guy that's fired up, excited to be the GM and be able to make those decisions. And Pete Carroll's a longtime coach that's been there, done that, so he can help out along the way. It feels like the three of them, that threesome right there, is a really good one. So we'll see what happens. But I have no problem with Mark Davis, the owner. I think, again, a guy that could tell you what he doesn't know is okay by me, right? He can admit it. Hey, look, I know what I don't know. I don't know football. I'm not a football guy. So thanks so much for the call, Big E. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from L.A. Raider Steve. Says, Q, good morning, brother. First off, I love the direction our Raiders are going so far. Carroll and Spytek, I love it. Now, what do you think about this? Do you think it could happen? The Raiders trade Max away to move up in the draft, sign Khalil Mack, and add him to our defense with Welcome and Kuntz. Yes, Mack isn't the Mack of yesterday, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. I'm not pounding the table for this, but I'm wondering if it's a possibility. What says you, Q? Just compete, baby. L.A. Raider Steve. Thanks so much for the text. I appreciate you. I do enjoy the direction that this team is going as well. I think it's going to go really well, but that doesn't mean trading Max Crosby. Not at all, especially after Monday's press conference, and that's really why I want to double down on that. He was referenced multiple times by Pete Carroll and John Spytek as those are the kind of guys. That's the kind of guy we want in the locker room, right? Pete Carroll said, Max, go tell the guys that we're coming, right? Gather your guys around. Let them know that we're coming, right? He's going to be the leader of that defense. They got to work out the contract situation, the guaranteed money, which he doesn't have any. He references it all the time. That has to be addressed, and it will, right? But I feel very comfortable that Max Crosby is going to be on this team moving forward. I've said it many times. I don't know what the guaranteed money looks like. I don't know how valuable that is to this staff, but I do know this staff can appreciate Max Crosby. And the way that they want to compete, as you said, just compete, baby. The way that they want to compete, that's right up Max Crosby's alley. Now, I wouldn't have any problem if they did decide to sign Khalil Mack in free agency. They've got the money to do it. Team him up with Max. That would be cool. I would have no problem with that, right? And especially if they bring back a couple guys that they have a healthy rotation. We know the one thing that Pete Carroll's going to want to do as a defensive-minded guy, he's going to want to get after the quarterback. He's going to want to have that filthy defense, right? And the more guys that can get after the quarterback, the better it is on the back end. It makes the linebackers better. It makes the secondary better. It makes the safeties better if those guys up front can get to the quarterback. So, I don't think you're going to see any Max trade. We've all been there, done that. We've said that before, and we all know how it shook out with the Khalil Mack trade, but I just don't think it's that day and time. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Cheese Grater Raider. He's calling to talk about a few subjects, including how he came up with his name. Also, he went back to listen to the old Khalil Mack trade podcast that I did from back in the day and how ironic it is now that Pete Carroll's the head coach. He'll explain why. Plus, he has a question for me. Here's Cheese Grater Raider.
What's going on, man? This is the Cheese Grater Raider. Formerly Mike from San Jose. And I got my name, Cheese Grater Raider, because I was listening to all of the Raider fans calling in, and they had, unique names, and I wanted one myself. And I heard some that rhymed, and that's what kind of triggered me to come up with mine. I'm speaking of Vader Raider, and I liked how that sounded. So I went with Cheese Grater Raider, and the reason being because I love to cook, and my mom would always use pre-shredded cheese, and I hated it because it didn't have the flavor. So, I'm one that will buy the block of cheese, and I'll grate that myself. I don't care if it takes longer. And it actually doesn't, because I got a rotary one where you just spin it. Anyways, that's how I came up with Cheese Grater Raider. And anyways, I'm listening to your podcast about the Khalil Mack trade, like you had suggested, and the reason why is because you said, if I want to laugh, and being back in school, it's a little stressful. I thought I'd give myself a laugh here, and so I'm listening to it, and I had to call back because it's ironic that you're talking about the Khalil Mack trade and how you feel, and you said, and I quote, he pulled a Pete Carroll. How ironic is that Pete Carroll is now our coach? You said he pulled a Pete Carroll and he ran the ball at he threw the ball at the 1 yard line instead of running it in. I don't know. I thought that was funny, but it brought me up to think, how would you feel, with the new regime that we have? It brings up free agency and who they want to bring in and who they want to ship out. And how would you feel if they all of a sudden decided to trade Max Crosby? Would you feel as betrayed as you did with the Khalil Mack trade? Would you be more upset? Would you be less upset? I'd like to know your thoughts on that, Q. Anyways, love what you do, man. Listen to your podcast each and every day. Haven't missed a show in a few years. I think since they moved to Vegas, actually. And I appreciate you and I appreciate Ari because, I'll go on to the YouTube channel to see your reactions when you say certain things. I want to see how your expressions look like. So I appreciate the YouTube channel. Anyways, that's all I got, Q. Go Raiders. Yay, yay.
Cheese Grater, thanks for the call. Thanks for the explanation on your name. That's really cool because I was always wondering how you came up with your name. So shout out to you, Cheese Grater Raider. I'm not a guy that cooks anything. I'm a guy that I'll put it in the microwave or I'll take you out to eat. Those are the two options. It's microwave or I'm taking you out to eat. Nothing. I'm not in the kitchen. I'm not cooking nothing. So I can respect that, Cheese Grater Raider. Again, as I mentioned before, I don't see the Raiders trading Max at all. Especially after hearing Monday's presser. I could reference my last statement, right? I don't see that as all, and going back to that Khalil Mack podcast, I'm glad that they don't have the YouTube. I'm glad we didn't have YouTube, I should say then, or at least we didn't have it on the Locked On Raiders podcast because you would have seen me. That was a bad day. That really was. I mean, waking up that day after doing a high school football game that Friday night, knowing that I had to go to Baylor, knowing that I had to mow the lawn, knowing that I had to go to the radio station. I didn't even have a studio at the house. I was going to the radio station every day to record the podcast and went in there. Still, I think I had grass on me. I still don't think I was 100% cleaned up from mowing the lawn. I was in a bad mood. You would have saw me flip off my coworker who stuck his head in the window and, "Hey, Q, how are you doing today?" And I'm like, "Man, you know how I'm doing. I'm doing bad." Right? So, YouTube would have been a bad day to have a YouTube. I'd have had to turn the camera off that day. You didn't want to see your boy. But that was a bad day. I don't see the Raiders repeating that kind of mistake anytime soon because that clearly was a mistake. And it is ironic how I referenced Pete Carroll on that show. And now Pete Carroll, all these years later, is the head coach of the Raiders. But thanks so much for the call. And I'm glad you went back and checked out the show, though, because as I mentioned, it was a heck of a show. Let's just put it like that. Thanks again. Up next, got a text from Strange Raider in the Bay. What's up, Q? Strange Raider from the Bay. Just want to say I'm pumped for next year and think people need to pump the brakes on saying our team isn't good. Look back at the scores of those games. We never really got blown out. We had a squad full of second string and practice squad players. We're going to sign the right players to new contracts, and this new staff is going to fill the holes we do have. I love what Pete Carroll said about the quarterback position. It's overblown, and when you build the right squad, a good quarterback can be anywhere. Let's go, Raiders. Let's get behind these guys and just win, baby. That's Strange Raider in the Bay. And thanks so much for the text. I appreciate it. And yeah, I don't think that anyone's saying the team isn't good for every reason that you mentioned. It's just that team that's going to be playing in Super Bowl 59 is really good. That team in LA is getting better. That team in Denver is getting better. So the Raiders are playing catch up, right? There was something that Matt Rule said to me years ago, and it really, I'll never forget it. And this is when he was at Baylor, and Baylor was not good, but they had a nice recruiting class coming in. He felt good about them improving. But he said the thing you have to remember is as much as we're improving, everyone around us is improving too. The same chance that we have to improve, they have a chance to improve. So, yeah, we are playing and we're catching up, but the other guys are still trying to stretch the lead on who they are. So I do think that the Raiders can get turned around pretty quickly. I don't know what that means as far as wins. I don't even think I'm going to do a win projection, prediction this year, just because it always seems to be wrong anyway. And then all of a sudden you get people's hopes up and then everyone gets angry and, wants to vent and wants to, whatever. And I don't know. Like, I just want to see it put together. It's one of those, I kind of rather see it now instead of talk about what it's going to be. I just want to deliver what the facts are, deliver what the team, what they're thinking of, what they feel like that they can be, and then kind of sit back and see how it goes before we start talking about, well, this team could be a playoff team. And again, it's not even February yet. They haven't hit free agency. They haven't hit the draft. They haven't hit the field. They haven't done anything as far as like training camp or mini camp or any of that. So we don't even know what this team's going to look like. We don't even know what free agents of their own they're bringing back yet. So after they start to put everything together, I think we'll have a better idea and understanding of who and what this team could potentially be. Again, do I know if that means that we're going to talk about how many wins I think they're going to get? Probably not. But we'll just talk about if this team, how competitive we believe this team will be in 2025. Thanks so much for the text. I appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from Tadrees in New Jersey. He's calling to talk about the introductory press conference, how he felt following it, and then responds to Chef Raiders' call at the end of Wednesday's show about the Raiders being much improved in 2025.
Hey, what's up, Q? Tadrees from New Jersey. All I have to say is after hearing the introduction press conference, what I heard was a commitment to excellence. There was no hype, no attempts to embrace the Raider way, and that should just lead to wins, baby. That's all I wanted to say. But after hearing Wednesday's show, I want to talk about what the last caller was talking about and improving and winning right away, potentially. If we think about every year, 2 teams don't make the playoffs. Like 2 to 4 teams don't make the playoffs the next year after they made the playoffs. So if, our team could have made better in-game decisions, we probably could have won a couple more games this year with an experienced head coach like Pete Carroll, with the commitment to excellence and people doing their job and focusing on their assignments. John Harbaugh brought that team to the playoffs, and then, like you said at the end of yesterday's show, that Sean Payton, he brought a rookie to the playoffs. Now, that doesn't bode well for Russell Wilson, right? But the year before, he had Russell Wilson. The next year, you probably didn't think a rookie would bring his team to the playoffs. Guess what? Both of those teams got 2 wins each against the Raiders. They swept us, if I'm not mistaken. So with better coaching this year, there's, I wouldn't put out the possibility that, we can be in a playoff hunt. Let's just put it that way. We may not make the playoffs, but I can see Pete bringing that commitment to excellence every day, and day in and day out, and then getting this team on the hunt for the playoffs, if not the playoffs itself. So thanks for all you do, Q. Just win, baby.
Tadrees, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And it's funny, man. I feel like all the calls and texts kind of go together. It's like 2 by 2, right? One call, one text, they go together. Another text, another call, they go together. That's just kind of what it is. And right, I said it earlier before, Pete Carroll doesn't have anything less than a 6-win season. So I guess that could be the ceiling, the floor of where they're going to be in 2025. You have to feel like he's going to be at least a couple of games better than Antonio Pierce, just from know-how, just from understanding situational football, just from, the experience that he has and knowing how to get it done. So that already is a better feeling. Now it's just, how are they going to put it together? What are the players going to look like? Who's the quarterback going to be? Are the Raiders going to get their quarterback of the future? Like, there's so many questions that we don't know the answer to yet. It's hard to, say exactly who they're going to be. But, yeah, they definitely can be much improved. And like I said, we saw Justin Herbert and the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh get to the playoffs in year 1. We saw Sean Payton and the Broncos and a rookie quarterback get to the playoffs in year 2. So anything is possible with the team. We just got to see how it's all put together. But Tadrees, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. And that's going to do it for today's show. We got a text from Raider Sanchez that we'll get to tomorrow. We got another text, and I might get to it, from Just Win Will, talking about the free agents that the Raiders currently have, and kind of wants me to do an exercise with who to bring back and who not to bring back. We might get that in segment number 2. I'm not guaranteed because I don't know what's going to happen later on today. I don't know what's going to happen as far as coaching carousel goes, assistant coaches with the Raiders. There could be some big breaking news, right? So I'm going to kind of, I have it like penciled in, but I don't have it written in ink. I have it written in pencil, so I can erase it and say, you know what, I can come back to this conversation on another day. But thanks so much. We'll definitely get back to calls and texts. We'll have news and notes, and we'll see where everything takes us as we close out the week really strong on the Friday and then get ready for, a trip to New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.